Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on changes to REBA 2002 and the COVID update. So let's get started. A little bit of background. Many of you have heard me speak before. I've been a real estate lawyer for 35 years. I've sold books all over Canada. I've been a guest real estate expert on all the news programs, and I've been quoted in all the national newspapers, especially on the subjects of COVID and residential tenancies. And I'm a senior partner with realestatelawyers.ca, LLP. My books are still very popular. If you have any desire for my updated landlord guide, just contact me at mark@realestatelawyers.ca. A little bit about our firm. We now are able to sign clients up 24 hours a day pretty well all over the world using our remote video signing with DocuSign. So clients do not have to travel to sign any closing papers, and we can close deals now everywhere in the province. We've always paid real estate commissions by EFT to the brokerage, and this is how we pay our sellers. And for buyers, we are a bill payment at all the banks, so they don't have to incur fees for wiring or EFT charges. They can just pay us without having to line up at the bank with a mask on the day of closing. The agent and the client are advised immediately that the deal has closed, and we were one of the first, I believe, to provide lock boxes to sellers for keys. And I'm delighted. One of the positive things regarding COVID closings is that lock boxes are used more often by agents, buyers, and sellers to exchange the keys on the closing date. I am always available for legal support and advice. Just email me to mark@realestatelawyers.ca. Here's our disclaimer, because there is a lot of legal tax advice being given, and you do need to discuss this more with lawyers and accountants before you make any decisions. So let's first start with the key changes coming and already here with REBA 2002. The first is the name. So that says it all. The name is going to be changed to the Trust in Real Estate Services Act. And to me, that says something. It's a recognition by the province that an agent is a professional, and that when you're signing the largest contract of your life, as is usually the case, you really need to trust the agent to protect you. And that runs right through all these changes, that an agent should be treated as a professional, similar to lawyers, doctors, accountants. And so similarly, for many of you, you're going to have to make a decision either whether to incorporate and then when to incorporate. And these are not easy decisions, and they don't apply equally to everyone. So first ask yourself, is this something you should do online, or do you think you should have a professional team, lawyers, accountants specifically, to assist you in doing that? So the big change that is in effect October 1st is agents are allowed to incorporate, and you've heard the term PREC, which stands for a personal real estate corporation. Now, people have asked me, well, let's say I have a corporation. Why can't I use what I have, or should I set up a new one for this personal real estate corporation? For many reasons, I think you should set up a new corporation. Don't combine it with anything else. Just think of it as a commission corporation. That's all it's there for. It's only there to collect your commission, to be between you and your brokerage to collect your commission. You could, and in my opinion, you should use your personal name in the real estate corporation, frankly, just to make it easier for the brokerage to pay you, so they don't have a whole bunch of new names to issue checks to. But remember, you can't advertise the corporation anywhere. You still can only advertise your personal name and the brokerage the way you advertise today. That's how you can advertise tomorrow, because your corporation cannot trade in real estate. That's why I would discourage the use of the words homes or properties in your name, because that sort of implies that the corporation is trading in real estate. You don't want it advertised, shown anywhere. It's just receiving your commission. And the advantage that you've seen in other seminars is that a corporation only pays 12.5% tax. And so if the corporation earns 100,000, for example, it will only pay $12,500 in tax. But the key is what happens to the rest of that money. If you just take out the rest of the money from the corporation, you'll end up paying just about the same amount of tax as you're paying today. So then people say it's not worth it to incorporate. You have to already have some discipline to leave some money in the corporation so it can grow. And the net effect is to reduce your overall tax rate. You'll see that you can, after discussions with your accountants, in some cases take money out of the corporation by dividends, which could have certain tax benefits for you, or you can take a salary, which may have other tax benefits for you and the corporation. You may be able to employ family members with certain restrictions, and you can defer income almost right away. So as an example, if you have a lot of income between January 1st and these October 31st in 2020, and then you incorporate starting November 1st, you could literally move the rest of your income for this year into the corporation's first year and thus defer that income, which likely would otherwise be at the top end of the rates of tax if you would keep it in your personal return. And there will also be an ability to transfer commissions that may have been earned before incorporation. Let's say you did a pre-construction deal a year ago, but it won't be payable for another year. You could still direct that commission into the corporation, but these are all discussions you need to have with your accountant. So you see that there are many benefits that could be applicable to anyone who does this. The corporation will not be insured by your RICO insurance policy. So there's a further warning. You don't use this corporation anywhere. You don't sign anything under this corporation. You continue to act the way you are. You sign for your brokerage when you do a listing or a buyer representation agreement personally, and you are personally still covered under your RICO insurance policy. So what does RICO say about all this? Well, RICO has guidelines they've already set out as to what this corporation should be doing. Well, the agent has to be the sole president, director, and controlling shareholder of all the voting shares in the personal real estate corporation. Now, you could have other classes of non-voting shares that could be held by family members. So again, this allows you to think about some estate planning with your own accountant, financial advisors. And only that controlling shareholder, the agent, is allowed to trade in real estate on behalf of the corporation. And the controlling shareholder must be employed by a brokerage. And you can only receive remuneration from the brokerage employing the controlling shareholders. This is why more than one agent cannot own a corporation. It can only be one agent working for the brokerage that can receive money. Similarly, husband and wife, if you're both agents, have two separate corporations. And then once all of this is done, the controlling shareholder must send an email to RICO, just giving you the name of the corporation and the address of the corporation. The address can be even your home address. Now, the agent has to enter into an agreement with the corporation and the brokerage regarding commission. In other words, most of you will have an independent contractor type agreement with your brokerage. Well, this goes in there where the brokerage now just agrees to pay any commissions owing to you to your personal real estate corporation, and this will include all commissions owing after the corporation is incorporated. And the agent has to give proof to the brokerage that all the RICO requirements about sole director, officer, controlling shareholder has been complied with by the agent when they set up this corporation. So given that as a background, what you need to have done, our firm has already provided this service to many agents, and we're doing it we've cut our prices to essentially $600 plus all the fees and disbursements. So the total will be about $1,350. Most you'll see out there quotes are between $2,000 to $2,500. We're doing this to keep the barrier low for an agent to incorporate and start taking advantage of this. Now, we will also include other classes of shares so that agents can either right away or down the road add family members as non-voting shareholders, depending on their circumstances and advice by their accountants. People ask how long it'll take. We can organize a company and get it all going within a week to 10 days. And we've already prepared the agreement between the agent, the brokerage, and the personal real estate corporation that you can use to immediately start receiving commissions. And it includes the information needed so the brokerage is satisfied that you have complied with all RICO requirements. And so if anybody has any questions about this, please email me to mark@realestatelawyers.ca. So some of these changes that have been announced are not here yet, but they're coming. So as an example, there will be no more customers. In other words, the definition of a customer is going to disappear. So either someone is your client, which is what they should be when you sign somebody up, or they represent themselves. And of course, there will have to be forms developed when people do not want to become a client and they're self-representing. But the good news is that you will still be able to double end your commission. But similar to today, when you have a customer on one side and a client on the other side, whenever you're acting on both sides, there is a concern that perhaps you're not being fair to somebody. I've always said, when you're on both sides, especially the buyer, make sure that they obtain their own legal advice, make the deal conditional on buyer-lawyer review before the deal becomes firm. Buyers can always bring a lawsuit against you, but it's very hard for them to be successful when they had a chance to discuss this with a lawyer in advance. And as we move to this self-represented model, that's even more important, that you make sure the buyer has some advice before they sign anything. With greater trust comes greater responsibility. So the penalties are increasing now. And so it'll go up from 25 to 50,000 for an individual agent, 100,000 for a brokerage for violating the code of ethics and really not looking after your clients. And so that's important to me, that you do practice in a way that doesn't incur penalties. Because I've always believed if you give people an experience that is great, not only will you never have a penalty, but you'll also give an experience that generates repeat business and referrals. And that's why you're in business. Now, if you do generate a lot of penalties, it may not be easy to renew your license, and the RICO will have the ability to investigate much more quickly when a complaint is made against you. So a couple of principles to remember. Number one, no matter what you're doing, carefully complete all documents, whether it's a BRA, listing agreement, working with a realtor. RICO wants to make sure that everything has been carefully and correctly completed. And also, remember this, has your client given written consent to everything you are doing? If you just remember that extra principle, you will likely stay away from problems with RICO. So an example, a complaint that I've received a lot is some listing agents put in the listing that if they show the property to a buyer of another agent who ends up making an offer, they're going to claw back sometimes up to 1% of the commission payable to the buyer agent. And this upsets many buyer agents. They complain to RICO. And RICO's answer is pretty simple. There's nothing illegal about a commission clawback. However, RICO asks the following question: did the seller agree to that commission clawback? Because I could see some sellers saying, well, wait a minute, I understand why you're doing this, but if you take away 1% from the buyer may not send people to my home to buy. I don't want that. And that's why RICO says, make sure you have the permission of your client to anything that you're doing. What's coming else? Well, the sellers may be able to disclose the highest price in a bidding war to other bidders. We don't know exactly what this means, but it could be leading to some kind of a silent auction in a bidding war, which I don't think most realtors would support. But remember the couple of issues, main issues that the public complains about with bidding wars. Number one, that the listing agent's client seems to win when and there's a suspicion they know what other people are bidding, or buyers who complain that they're bidding against themselves when they're told that there are a bunch of offers and they end up bidding way more than they really had to had they known, how many bidders were actually involved. And the whole concept of bully offers or preemptive offers will also be looked at, because there have been a lot of complaints when people say, well, the house will be available next week for offer presentations. And then people find out that night it got sold to a bully offer or a preemptive offer. So it's possible that a change may be made saying that the minute you list a property, you must be able to accept offers. And that could eliminate the whole concept of a bully offer. So you see, any change to bidding wars, it has impacts, and we're just going to have to see it. This will happen down the road. So since we're talking about bidding wars, and they do happen still today in many pockets, let's go through some of the key questions that I've seen raised in the last little while. So number one, if let's say tonight is a bidding war, can 3 buyers choose to have a silent auction today themselves? Well, the answer is it's permitted as long as it was not facilitated by any agent. So if 3 buyers come to a property and they're waiting for their agents for a bidding war presentation, and the 3 buyers just say, let's get together, socially distant, show each other the offers, whoever's the highest can go in and buy it. That is legal. What's not legal is an agent can't say, okay, everybody, let's show each other the offers. Now, here's another question I get a lot. Do you have to disclose if one of the offers contains a reduction in commission? Personally, I've never understood why people put in commission reductions, because a buyer agent can always pay their commission to their client legally and without any tax consequences. So I don't know why they do it, but it does have the impact of, in many ways, stopping the momentum of a bidding war. But you still have to disclose it according to RICO. And so I say that if you want to stop this, then why not just say before any offers come in that we will not present any offer to the seller if they contain a commission reduction. Simple, you won't present. Similarly, that escalation clause, I will pay $5,000 more than anyone else. Why not just say right away, we will not present an offer to the seller if it contains an escalation clause, because of the confusion of escalation clauses. But remember what I said earlier. Whenever you do something like that, you must make sure the seller has given you written permission to do that. Because some sellers may say, wait a minute, I like that commission reduction clause, or I like the escalation clause. Don't do that. That's why you must make sure your client has agreed with what you are doing. Next question. Let's say you have an accepted agreement and the buyer is in the midst of a home inspection period. They have 3 days to do a home inspection. And during that period, you get an offer from a completely new buyer that you're willing to accept. It's a backup offer. And the question is, do you have to disclose that to the buyer doing their inspection? And the language of the Code of Ethics is difficult here. Personally, I don't believe this needs to be disclosed, but RICO says, and I believe it's based on transparency, that it would have to be disclosed. And many of you may say, wait a minute, if the second offer is for a higher price, why would I disclose that? I want the first buyer to cancel, and so I don't want to disclose that. Very difficult case, because there was a RICO decision where the listing broker who did not disclose the second offer was given a penalty for non-disclosure. And so in my view, you're almost in a no-win situation. I can see that if the second offer was perhaps same price as the first, you would want to disclose it to the first buyer because it's putting pressure on them not to come back with amendments. But I can also see when you would not want to disclose. So my advice is, before you do anything, speak to the seller lawyer, get instructions in writing, because that will assist you in the decision that you're going to make. What if you're suspicious still that the listing broker doesn't have another offer when they say, I'm expecting another offer? This is the bidding war clause that I've always given out for the last several years, and this will still help you if you're not sure whether another offer is coming in. And if the seller does receive no other offer, you have the right to change your mind or reduce your offer on notice. And if anyone wants a copy of the webinar or the PowerPoint, you just have to email me, mark@realestatelawyers.ca. So now let's switch over to COVID. Based on what we've learned, we're expecting a second wave. What are the lessons we've learned in the first wave of COVID? It doesn't matter, frankly, if you're in quarantine, your house can't sell, you can't get a mortgage, you cannot cancel because of COVID. And it's very similar to the market crash in 2017. You could not cancel just because of dramatic changes in the real estate market. Theoretically, the only way a deal could be canceled is if the government registration system completely went down or lenders could not fund mortgage loans. And I said in March this was not likely to occur, and it has not occurred. The government has people working remotely to keep the registry system running no matter what. And so this is not an issue and likely will not be an issue. When people ask me about COVID clauses, my first reaction is you don't need any. We're getting deals closed, but if you're going to include COVID clauses, here are the three that I recommend that people use. The first says that all the closing money will be paid by wires. In other words, no checks, no bank drafts, no certified checks, no bank drafts. We sign everything electronically and everybody agrees to use a lockbox on closing. To me, those are common sense clauses that help deals close, not just during a pandemic, but anytime quickly. Now I'd like to just step back a little bit and let you know what happens on many deals where, as you know, the registry system does close down every day at 5 p.m. But your agreement of purchase and sale says you can close up to 6 p.m. And what that permits is that as long as the buyer lawyer can get the money into the seller lawyer's trust account before 6 p.m., even though we cannot register, we can still close in escrow, meaning that the buyer can be given the keys The seller can be released the money, and we register the next morning when the system comes back online. So people ask me, well, the money's paid, the keys are given. What happens the next morning if a lien is registered? You've already given out the money. What happens then? Well, the beauty is that because buyers will have title insurance, almost every title insurance policy contains something called gap coverage. So it will cover this so that if, God forbid, there is a lien registered, and I've never seen it happen, but if it happened, the buyer title insurance policy would pay to remove it from the title. So you see, this leads me to the only, frankly, COVID clause that I might accept today, which is that gap coverage clause. So what it means in English, frankly, is that let's say we're closing today, and at 4 o'clock, the government says the system is down, we cannot register. And we're going to be down for a week. Does that mean we can't close? No. We just call the title insurance company and we get verification that they will grant gap coverage so that no matter when it goes back up, let's say it goes back up in a week, we register at that time. And if anything did happen, an intervening lien, title insurance pays for it. So this is the only clause, frankly, that I would agree to. But I've seen other clauses with temporary extensions. People are sick, they extend for 14 days. I understand it. I'm not against it, but they're not really necessary. Lawyers would do this anyways, practically, just to get the deal closed. So principle is, if there are no clauses, terrific. If there are some clauses, just make sure that they allow you to extend for a short period of time. No one should have the right to cancel because of COVID. Waiver of liability. So for showings, people are getting these forms signed, and there's no harm in requesting these. In my personal opinion, it would be hard for a buyer to make a claim anyways against a seller or a brokerage because real estate is an essential service and they're putting themselves out there visiting properties. However, all these forms pretty much say the same thing. The buyer says, we know COVID is serious, we don't have any symptoms, and we're not going to hold anyone responsible if we get sick. So I totally understand them. You get them signed, terrific. I know when you have 5 showings, sometimes it's hard to keep track of this and get the forms. That's part of the problem. But still, I'm in favor of this. The final topic is changes to tenancies because of Bill 184, which is the new changes. And there have been a lot of controversy about this. But for the most part, in my opinion, they're beneficial to tenants, and landlords and agents need to understand the differences. So the main abuse to me in the act up till now has been the N12, or the form where landlords either pretend to go back in with their family or pretend to sell to a buyer just so that they can evict a tenant and then either double the rent on someone else or sell it without a tenant where they can get more money. So this is a problem. And so now they've increased the penalty. So if you lie about this today and you're an individual, your penalty just went up from $25,000 to $50,000, and a corporation up to $250,000. In addition, if you're selling to a buyer, you now have to pay 1 month compensation to the tenant if you're evicting for that reason. It didn't used to be any compensation. They've added that in. And also, here's another one. If you trick a tenant through a lie and you get caught, because normally if you're saying you're going to move back in, you're going to stay for a year, but you lie, the tenant can now sue you as well for up to 12 months rent. So you see, they've upped the penalties to stop this abuse. And the landlord has to swear as well that they've not used this reason within the last 2 years, because many landlords try to evict multiple tenants for the same reason, which can't be correct. Now, this is very controversial. So if a landlord and tenant make a deal, and they have to make deals now because of COVID, tenants have been behind in the rent, so they make a deal with the landlord saying, okay, I will catch up the rent over a 1-year period. And things are going well, but then the tenant breaks the deal. So the landlord can now apply for an eviction without a hearing. So many tenant advocates say this is going to result in a disaster with tenants being evicted everywhere, homeless shelters rising. But what they don't say is the tenant can still dispute this. And so this isn't going to be a real problem, frankly. And many of you are already familiar with this, or should be, because we've had something called the N11 form for the last 30 years. The N11 is the agreement by the landlord and the tenant to terminate their tenancy. And today, this is probably the most used form, because the only way a landlord can guarantee that a tenant will leave is to make a deal, have them sign the form, and move out. And this is what I recommend all the time. But over the past 30 years, let's say the tenant didn't leave. Let's say the tenant said they were going to leave at the end of the month, and they didn't leave. Well, for the last 30 years, the landlord could still apply for an eviction without a hearing. He would just have to, or she would just have to put in the form that was signed. Tenant agreed to leave the end of the month. Landlord says they didn't leave. An eviction order is given. However, the tenant could always still dispute it. So the same way they could dispute the N11 process, they can dispute this. The goal here, though, is just to make a deal with the tenant. And that's why this process is no different. Now, evictions can still be processed today as of July 31st, but there's a big backlog of cases at the board. And to me, it's better to pay an incentive to the tenant to just leave early. And especially now that we're moving back into lockdown, I believe personally that most tenants can just refuse showings, saying, I don't care what the buyer signs. I'm afraid, and I'm not letting them in. I could see some tenants, vulnerable tenants, saying, unless somebody shows me a negative test within the last 24 hours, I'm not letting them in. And I could see a judge saying that's reasonable if the province is locked down. So this is why when you're dealing with tenants, my advice is always the same. You should meet with the tenant, try to find them another place to live, pay them an incentive, move them out, and then you're not going to have a problem showing, selling, closing your agreement. Because even if it's in good faith, it could take months to get a hearing and complete your deal. In 2020, you could raise the rent 2.2%, but it's been frozen for 2021. No increases will be permitted in 2021 unless the tenant leaves on their own, and then you could raise the rent or charge whatever the market will bear. The market for rentals is not as strong as it was a year ago. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone for attending. If anybody has any questions, please send them to me at mark@realestatelawyers.ca. And I'd be delighted to answer. If anybody wants a copy of the recording and the PowerPoint, mark@realestatelawyers.ca. So thank you and have a safe and healthy day.